What is going on, Ohio Sm4sh? This is a little project I've been working on. I kind of want to make this a series. Let's see what sort of reception this first video gets. Now this video, as you can see, it's a Jigglypuff matchup chart. But this is a very special chart because in this case, this chart was made based on matchup charts from professional players and their input. So really quickly, I'm just going to go through which players I used and their opinion, and you may know a few of these players, maybe even more than you think. And we're going to start with, from what they say is Jigglypuff's only good matchup, which is going to be a default Mii brawler. Now I also have my sources right over here, and I'll probably have a download link in the description. That way you can download it and check it out for yourself, make sure everything is legit. Let's see, the first character I'm going to be looking for is Mii Brawler. If I can scroll down and find it. Here it is. And the player I got this from was Leaf FC. I'll have a link to his Twitter in this source's documentary. And according to him, this is a 55-45. And without defaults, I can kind of see it. Both Mii Brawler and Mii Swordsman are very lacking without customs on. But particularly Mii Brawler really gets hurt by the banning of customs. Next, we're going to go to Captain Falcon, who, according to Fatality, who's all the way at the top of this list, according to Fatality's recent tier list, it's actually a 50-50 Falcon versus Puff. And I've noticed overall he's had a very consistent opinion of this being the case. It's very, very interesting, especially considering all the recent fantastic results that Fatality has been getting recently. Maybe you would consider counterpicking Puff against Falcon. I wouldn't recommend it unless your character has, I don't know, a 60-40 against him, and maybe you're better off with the 50-50. But that is the situation. Alright. Now after that is DD. Now DD is an interesting case. I actually really couldn't find any recent results from any of the DD mains. Girthwake, for example, has deleted his Twitter, apparently. Deleted, banned, not really sure what the situation with that is. So I couldn't really find any results. Now, in my personal opinion, and speaking with some Puff mains, I personally feel, and you may already know this, that matchup is a 60-40 in Puff's favor. So I would put it right here, for example. That's my opinion. At the same time, though, I'm not a professional player, so I really don't feel the need to put my bias in this list. So I just settle for putting Jigglypuff right here in the 50-50 spots. Commonly agreed that both characters are bottom 5. So I think this is a pretty fair statement, though personally I would put DDD right here. That's just my personal opinion. I'm sure some players might put him in at 55-45 or even 60-40. So I couldn't see it getting any worse than that. Then after that's Ganondorf. This is very commonly considered to be a 50-50 matchup. But the players I got this one from are Gleed and A2Z OMG. And there are, once again, links to their Twitters over there. The next one is going to be Mii Gunner. Again, noted to be a 50-50 for that. And that comes from Flama. It was kind of hard to get a source for default Mii Gunner because not many people play the character. The next one is actually much more interesting in my opinion. It's Wii Fit Trainer. Wii Fit Trainer goes at 50-50. Now the two players I got this from are Wii Twerk Trainer, who's one of the better Wii Fits. And according to Wii Twerk Trainer, they felt that it's a 50-50 matchup, according to their matchup chart. Now with John Numbers, I checked out his matchup chart. It was a little bit outdated. But actually, I got the opportunity to go on his stream. He was streaming Splatoon 2, and I actually got to chat with him on stream while he was playing it. I got to ask him. And according to him, he would say the matchup is either a 50-50 or maybe a 55-45. And judging both from John Numbers and Wii Twerk Trainer, even though John Numbers is considered a better player, I decided to put it at 50-50. He did note that Puff's lack of range near the ledge, no disjoints, can really make it hard during the matchup, but Puff's crouch is a significant advantage in the matchup. Being able to crouch over some of Wii Fit's attacks, potentially grabs, and projectiles. So I sold it for a 50-50. This is one of the few times I was able to directly talk to a trainer about how they felt this matchup was. So I feel pretty safe about this one right here. Wii Fit Trainer. Right. The next one is going to be Bowser. Now we're getting into the 45-55s. It's pretty much all downhill here for Puff. Let's be honest. 50-50s, you could pull it off. You have a fair chance. You can just body me Brawler, but from here on out, it just gets really abysmal. Alright, so the first one is going to be Bowser at 45-55, which to me personally is really surprising because I would put Bowser lower. I think it's a terrible matchup for Puff, in my personal opinion. But in this case, I got this from a Deluxe Menu, and I also got this from Lord Mix. I got this from their matchup charts. The next one is going to be Bowser Jr. again at 45-55 from Blanc and Rito. Again, I can see this being a 45-55. This one is very believable. Similarly, Dr. Mario once again at 45-55, and I can really see that I got this from Sensational, and I think it's B7. Yeah, it's B7 Games. I got this from those two. Again, I can see it. Unlike Mario, who unsurprisingly is in the 60-40 range, Dr. Mario's recovery really leaves him vulnerable to getting gimped, and Puff has all the tools it needs to get that gimp. Obviously, though, Puff's ground presence is extremely lackluster, so he's going to win to the ground pretty much every time. Next is Falco, again another 55-45. Let's see if I can find Falco right here, and I got it from, I hope I pronounce this right, Cyro, and Daybreak. Same thing linked to their Twitters. For me, I can definitely see this being a 55-45, but I will say, personally, I actually would say this is more of a 50-50, because in the air, they can pretty much go toe-to-toe, and it's actually pretty similar in the ground. Crouch is very useful against Falco's lasers. Falco has a really slow running speed, and his combos off of grab aren't actually all that good. And as everyone knows, Falco's recovery is very exploitable, especially compared to Fox. So personally, I'd put it at a 50-50, but again, going off of professional, it's put in the 55-45. It easily could be a 55-45, even in my own tier list. I might make that adjustment. The next one is going to be Game & Watch. Game & Watch again at the 55-45. But personally, I think I might put this in the 60-40. I think this is obviously, I think that Game & Watch has a very distinct and well-pronounced advantage. I wouldn't say it's worse than 60-40 because when you get there, you get to top tiers and high tiers like Pikachu and Bayonetta. Really, characters just body half the cast, or really 3/4 of the cast. And I got this from Reggie, who, according to his Twitter, is the best Game & Watch. According to him, it's a 55-45, if I'm not mistaken. There's a link to that also. The next one is going to be Ike, 55-45. This is from Nojinko and Rango. Links to theirs as well, 55-45. I can definitely see it being a 55-45. This is another one of those where I would personally put this as a 50-50. The reason being, as the metagame has progressed, people are really learned how to exploit Ike's weaknesses off stage. Like Falco, Ike's recovery is really exploitable, but unlike Falco, well, he's also slow like Falco, but he has a very large hurt box. Now, Ike's combo game is a little bit more solid than Falco's in my opinion, at least off of grabs. With the larger hurt box, the very exploitable recovery, definitely put him in a position to be really wrecked off stage. At the same time though, obviously, he can kill Puff extraordinarily early, and he does have some pretty interesting combos. So I would put it at a 50-50, but I will definitely take Rango's word for it at 55-45. Next up is Lucina. Okay, so I got it from Max Ketchum, a link for that as well. And Max Ketchum thinks it's a 55-45. I definitely agree with this. I can even see this potentially being a 60-40 in Lucina's favor. But not having that tipper can really actually help Puff in this matchup. Can help Puff get in a little bit more and exploit Lucina off stage. So I could never see this being a 50-50. I can definitely see this being, at best, 55-45 in Lucina. That's my opinion on the matter. Alright, the next one is straight from Elegant for Luigi. and he puts it at 55-45. And again, I can definitely see this. Obviously, Luigi's combo game is amazing, and even though Puff's a light character, even Puff's going to take a lot of damage after a Luigi grab. Especially if the Luigi doesn't have rage, it's going to be even harder. So I can definitely see it. At the same time, though, again, Luigi has one of the better recoveries in the game. It's not that exploitable, but it is definitely exploitable. If you happen to catch him while he's trying to get his jump in, he may not be able to recover. I can't remember if this character can wall jump or not. So I definitely agree 55-45. Most definitely. Could never see this being a 50-50. The next one is Marth, and this, interestingly enough, comes straight from MK Leo, who feels like this is a 55-45. I really don't know how to feel about this one. I'm really split on this one. On the one hand, one of my things with Marth personally is Marth seems to struggle to consistently land tippers, even at top level with MK Leo. Consistently landing tippers seems to be somewhat of a struggle, especially compared to characters like, let's say, Corrin, who it seems much easier for Corrin to get that tipper. So consistency seems to be an issue, so that may be why he put this at a 55-45, where there's a slight advantage on Marth's part. I could see this being a 60-40, but since I'm very confused on this one, I'm very inclined to take MK Leo's word for it. I can imagine a Puff, sort of getting a Marth off stage with the Wall of Pain. Both Lucina and Marth, their recoveries are good, but certainly not great, and very exploitable. So this next matchup is very interesting because we have a number of players in my scene, which is Neo, Northeast Ohio, who feel that this matchup isn't that bad. Some of them feel very comfortable with this matchup, even more comfortable than with their own mains. And given how no one plays Jigglypuff, the lack of matchup experience can be very helpful. But what I was really surprised to see was that DeBuzz, who is pretty much the main player of this character, actually agrees and seems to have the same opinion on this matchup as I do, and a lot of Northeast Ohio players. And that character, you've already seen him, is going to be Rosalina. And according to his latest tier list, he puts this as a 55-45 in Rosalina's favor. And I can definitely see this. Again, Rosalina is very floaty, very large hurt box. It's not that hard to whittle down Luma's health by spacing your back airs properly and whittling down Luma's health. Now I really thought about it a few days ago. Here's my opinion on how this matchup works, and I could be wrong about this. My opinion is, when it's Rosalina and Luma, it's a 55-45. But when Luma's dead and waiting to respawn, it's a 55-45 in Puff's favor. I really feel that Luma is what really makes this the 55-45. Luma gives Rosalina the kill power that she needs to rack up damage and kill Puff at a ridiculously early percentage. So that's my feelings on the matter. I'm very comfortable with this matchup, to be honest. I'm much more comfortable with this matchup with other characters I play. Because Puff is light, I have terrible English, but I have removed myself from very bad disadvantaged situations. That's one of the few strengths of Jigglypuff. Unlike a character like, say, King DDD, who I really don't have a high opinion of, Jigglypuff's advantage state, while bad, is definitely not the worst. Being light and having one of the best recoveries in the game in floaty is really useful for SDI and DIing out of combos. If you're very good at those things, then your Puff can be extremely aggravating to an opponent trying to steal the stock. Alright, but moving on, the next character is going to be Mega Man. But I got this from Scat and Kamine. And I linked their Twitters there below. Again, I can definitely see this be a 55-45. A trend with a lot of these characters is a lot of these characters have exploitable recoveries. Not all of them, but almost all of them have very exploitable recoveries. Their offstage presence can easily be threatened by Puff, and I think that definitely applies to Mega Man. Thanks to his projectile's very strong, grounded presence. But obviously, there's no hitbox on his up B, and it can be easy for Puff to exploit him. Also, it's even possible for Puff and other characters to steal a jump thanks to his, I forget what it's called, Rush Spring. Whatever, I should know, I'm a big Mega Man fan, it's a shame. But I can see this at 55-45. That being said, I can also see this being a lot worse at 60-40. Especially how annoying those lemons can be. And his down tilt. That's just me. This next one is Ness at 55-45. This comes from the cat. The cat's latest Ness matchup chart. And again, I can see this once again. Ness's ground presence is actually kind of lackluster. His aerial hitboxes are pretty great, so it creates an interesting dynamic with Puff and Ness from my experience, where Puff can actually outdo Ness on the ground. Obviously, Puff wants to avoid getting grabbed. That will just ruin it, and that's what I think really makes it. I think Ness's back throw is what really makes this a 55-45. His back throw and his great aerials. But aside from that, Jigglypuff's ground presence, I would say, is on par with Ness's because it's just overall very, very lackluster. What Puff has to worry about the most is pretty much getting grabbed, getting comboed from those grabs so you can float out of it. Yo-yo, for sure, that comes out I think at like frame 6. And if you're behind Ness and he yo-yos, that can be extremely aggravating. At the same time though, for sure, once again, when Ness is off stage, it's incredibly easy for Puff to gimp him. Especially if the Puff knows what they're doing. And like I said, even on stage, there are certain ground options that Puff can actually challenge because Ness's ground game is pretty infamous among Ness players. It's lackluster. Whereas his aerials, like Nair coming out frame 5 is fantastic. I would say his aerials would give Puff a harder time. His aerials, his projectiles, and his grab would give Puff a harder time than his actual ground game. But yeah, I might see this being a 60-40 also once again, but I can see it being 55-45. Certainly not even. Alright, the next one is Olimar, and this comes from Shootin'. Once again, hopefully I'm not butchering these names and pronouncing them correctly. Putting it at 55-45. And once again, I can kind of see this. What kind of sucks about Pikmin throw is you really can't aim the trajectory of how you throw it, as far as I'm aware. So it's not like, for example, with a character like Yoshi, he can aim his eggs, and if Puff is floating upwards, he can actually aim upwards. Or Pit, you can actually aim the arrows upward to home in on Puff, which can be really aggravating for Puff and really hurt the matchup. But he can't do that, so it's not hard for Puff to just float above the Pikmin. He's also very light, and his aerial presence isn't very pronounced, though I would say he has a pretty fair, strong ground game. But his aerial game is pretty lackluster, both off stage and even on stage. It's not hard for Puff to challenge him. His aerials don't really have particularly good range, so you can back air and trade, and it's actually good for Puff in that way, especially if he's off stage or near the ledge. So I can definitely see this being a 55-45. I definitely agree with that. Next is Princess Peach at 45-55. I believe I chose Umeki. One of the better, if not probably the best, Japanese Peach, and maybe debatably the best Peach, at 55-45. Peach is a character who I probably should have thought her through a little bit more. It's kind of hard for me to describe my feelings on this character because there really aren't too many Peach mains. With Peach, I'd say it's probably pretty hard for Puff to challenge Peach off stage. Obviously, there's Float, Up B, and the Parasol's insane knockback. It's a very good get off me option to scare Puff away. So off stage, it could be hard to harass Puff. But actually on stage, again, Peach is kind of a taller character. Peach is light. If you rest Peach at, let's say, 50-55% without rage, Peach is going to die. So all you have to do is get Peach to 50%, rest, hope that they don't get that instant upper KO, or if they're in the last stock, then you can just rest for free. You don't have to worry about it. It's not even a concern. Peach's ground game is okay. It's really where her aerials are that really stand out. Her ground game, as far as I'm aware, is pretty lackluster. She does have the turnips, which really, really help. And the turnips, to me, the turnips in the aerial game, but I would say more so the turnips in that very small chance of a bomb, really make this a very pronounced 45-55. Could never see this being a 50-50. But her lackluster ground game, how easy it is to rest her and kill her at an obscene percent. And she will die early, not just to that, she'll die early to Puff's forward smash near the ledge, Puff's sweet spotted up smash, killed Peaches at like 80% thanks to that. But But yeah, I agree. 45, 55, maybe a little bit worse. Next up, there's Rob at 45, 55. And Rob is going to be coming from, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Eric. And I can kind of see it because it's really not hard for Puff to bully Rob in the air. That's probably his worst state. Now he can interrupt his up B, which I think is pretty cool and pretty neat, pretty unique. He can interrupt his up B to get players off of them, who are harassing him off stage. He can use laser. If he's holding gyro, you can use gyro. But he can get bullied off stage. It's not just his exploitable recovery, even though he has a few ways to cover himself. It's also just his enormous hurt box, which means it's not only easy for Puff to combo him, it's also easy for Puff to rest him. It's very easy. Obviously, his on-stage presence is pretty pronounced. Pretty good frame data. Obviously, he has his laser and his gyros. Oh, gyro? I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But obviously, he has that, so his on-stage presence is pronounced. But a good Puff should be able to bully him and really have a good advantage state off-stage. So I can see this being a 55-45, most certainly. The next one actually surprised me a lot. I definitely would have put this as a 60-40. Though, talking to some Puff mains, and obviously the Sheik player from their matchup chart, from what I understand, this matchup, if the Puff player is really good, my Puff is lackluster. This would be a 55-45. Puff being light really helps, and this character has KOing problems, so Puff's not going to die that early in this matchup. But anyway, getting back to it, the player in question who feels this is a 55-45 is Mr. R. And once again, linked to his Twitter and his matchup chart below, who believes this is a 55-45. I think that's really interesting. Like I said, I would put it as a 60-40, but again, speaking with Puff mains, there does seem to be a surprising amount of them who feel that this is a 55-45. Sheik has the advantage for sure, absolutely. Sheik's frame data is amazing. Sheik's ground dominance is great. My guess would be outside of up aerial, because Sheik's up aerial is very, very good and very deadly. Puff should stay away from that. Outside of up aerial, I believe Puff can challenge Sheik in the air. Obviously, needles are absolutely terrible for Puff. Crouch helps with needles. You could crouch. Crouch is helpful with that. But yeah, it ends up being a 55-45. Like I said, I could easily see it being a 60-40, but people much better than I am say it's 55-45, so I will roll with that one. The next one is going to be Villager at 55-45. Villager's bowling ball is actually ridiculous. You can die incredibly early, even if you're not playing Jigglypuff. But the next one is Zelda at 55-45. And Zelda was interesting because there was a little bit of a lack of harmony between the opinion of Zelda. I went to Ven, Ferris, and Anpu. And their opinions, if I would remember correctly, kind of differed. With one of them thinking it was a 60-40, the other one thinking it was even, and one of them 55-45. So a real lack of harmony with this one. Now my personal feelings on Zelda are pretty low, but maybe not as low as DDD. I haven't really decided yet. I think I wouldn't say the matchup's in Puff's favor. I would actually personally say it's a 50-50. Because Zelda's similar to DDD in that I do think DDD probably has the worst disadvantage state between him and maybe Ganondorf. But Zelda's up there. Her disadvantage state's very bad. When she's, let's say you're juggling her and she's up in the air. What are options? Maybe teleport and hopefully not get punished. Maybe go to the ledge. Her mobility, her airspeed, her very large hurt box. Not very large, but decently large. So I personally put it at 50-50. But again, these are professionals. So they put it at 55-45 overall. Next is going to be Wario at 45-55. And this comes from the Reflex Wonder. And also from C4. I'm surprised I forgot to put that up there. They put it at 55-45. Yeah, I can definitely see this being a 55-45 for sure. It can be difficult for Jigglypuff to be aggressive. And the whole point of Wario, ideally and optimally, is to build up the waft. And obviously, Puff's going to die. I mean, most characters in the roster are going to die extremely early to the Wario Laugh. So the Puff player, there's a sense of urgency in that matchup to approach. But obviously, Wario has the tools he needs to be evasive in that matchup. Again, Puff can definitely bully him in the air. Let's say he gets the bite and tries to recover. Puff can definitely bully it. I've definitely seen it and done it before. I would say Wario has the edge on the ground, especially when using moves like forward tilt that heavily outrange Puff. But yeah, I can see it. Definitely 45-55. And then next last for 45-55 is Zero Suit Samus. This comes from Nick Riddle and Sky, and again, I can see this maybe a 60-40. Alright, and now we're getting into the 40-60, 60 in the opponent's favor, 40 for Puff. Get into the really bad matchups. The first one for this one is Charizard. Charizard's one of the few characters in this bracket where, personally, I kind of disagree with it. I certainly don't think it's 50-50. I'd actually say it's more of a 55-45 in Charizard's favor. He can get bullied pretty badly in the air. But this comes straight from Drayquaza and Silent Doom. And then after that, we have Cloud. Cloud being here isn't really a surprise. And in fact, in my opinion, the Puff-Cloud matchup is even worse than 40-60. I would put it somewhere at maybe 65-35 in Cloud's favor. Maybe even 70-30. I couldn't see it being any worse than that. But this comes from two players, I'm sure you've heard of them before, Komakuri and Tweak. Two of the best Cloud mains right now in our metagame. So I would definitely take their word for it. Alright, next is Corrin, again at 40-60. Corrin being here makes perfect sense. Corrin, the character has so many tools at their disposal. Their forward smash, insta-pin, neutral B, great aerials, back aerial for spacing, making it just incredibly hard for Puff to get in. And even off stage, Puff has a hard time bullying this character. And these come from Ryuga and Cosmos. Two very good Corrin players. Next up is Diddy Kong. Same thing. Diddy Kong being here again isn't really a surprise. I think this is perfect for Diddy Kong, who again can kind of get bullied off stage. That's to be mentioned. He can mix up his recovery with his up B, side B. He can wall cling, wall jump. All very useful mix-ups in the air. And this comes from Zenoto and Player One. Next up is DK. This is coming from Hikaru and DK Will. Again, this is something I could see. I'm not really sure. I wouldn't say this is 40-60. I would have to say I'm thinking, again, more of 55-45. And in his case, I think he's one of the few characters I might even say maybe this would be a 50-50. I'm aware that Donkey Kong has great range, a lot of intangibility, a lot of his moves. But again, he can definitely get bullied in the air, and his recovery is very linear, not unlike Cat and Falcon's, and it's actually not that hard to bully DK in the air. Even on the ground, Puff is so light, for some of his combos, if the percent's not right, or if one of them has rage, then I can just easily, if I'm playing Puff, float out of his combos. Next up, we've got Duck Hunt Dog. This is coming from Ozone and Dandy Penguin. Yeah, I can definitely see this one being a 60-40 in Duck Hunt's favor. Absolutely. Puff gets walled hard by all those projectiles. The can, the frisbee, Duck Hunt's down B. I can definitely see it. And the Duck Hunt can also use the can off stage to get anyone trying to gimp him off of him. It's a pretty decent get off me option, so I can definitely see that. Next up is Fox. Again, Fox being in here isn't a surprise. I 100% agree with this. This comes from Larry Lur. I'm sure you've heard of Larry Lur, probably the best Fox main, and a guy named Colonies. That sounds familiar. Wonder if that guy makes people go O2. But anyways, I definitely agree with this. Fox just has all the tools that he needs. If he gets any sort of momentum, Puff really can't deal with it. Outside of getting bullied off stage, and even that could be difficult for Puff to do, I can definitely see this being a 60-40 in Fox's favor. And there's no doubt in my mind, and honestly, I could see this matchup getting a little bit worse for Puff as the metagame progresses. Alright, next up is Kirby. This comes from Kamtoa and Muck at 60-40. This one's again a little bit trickier. I would definitely say I don't think this is a 60-40 in my personal opinion. I do know that Kirby's down aerial is just amazing. Down aerial is really good. He's got a good combo throw out of forward throw, and he's got a kill throw out of up throw. But I personally could see this, again, probably being more within this range of a 50-50, maybe a 55-45, somewhere in this range. I don't think Puff has any advantages. But again, just personal opinion. Next up we have Link, and this is coming from Izza. And I can definitely see this being a 60-40. This is, again, one of the few. I think this might be a little bit worse for Puff than 60-40. Maybe 65-35 or even worse than that. That's my personal opinion. It's not just that Link has a very strong projectile game using his bombs, his arrows, and the Gale Boomerang. It's also that Link has a pretty decent combo game. He's also got his air, he's got good range. But what, for me, in my opinion, makes this one of Puff's worst matchups personally is a lot of Link's moves have long hitbox duration. That's kind of one of the few good things about Puff is her long hitbox duration. But having a character like Link who not only has long hitbox duration, but also outranges you on top of that, and the moves have decent knockback and damage, it just can be absolutely terrible, especially combined with his projectiles. So I could see this being a little bit worse, in my personal opinion. Next up is Little Mac with Soul. And this is another one kind of similar to Kirby, where I could see being not quite as bad as this. Obviously, Little Mac is extremely dominant on the ground, but the problem with Little Mac is his aerial game is very, very lackluster. So all Puff has to do is grab him, forward throw, back throw, get him off stage. And there's really not much he can do. Maybe counter and hope to get a read and get back on stage, but it's really not all that hard for Puff to do that. Outside of having to worry about the KO punch, Little Mac can get early kills, but usually only off of hard reads. Even Puff won't die too early. And Rage Little Mac isn't very common because he's a light character, so he's liable to die before he gets a chance to really abuse any rage. So I can see this being somewhere, I'd say maybe within the 55-45 range if I had to pin it somewhere. Next up is Mario. This comes from Dan and Zenyu. And again, I can definitely see this feels perfect for this matchup. It just seems like for the majority of these matchups, especially the ones that I feel fit the 60-40, it's kind of a recurring theme of these characters are very dominant in neutral, but when you get to edge guarding situations and off stage, that's where Puff gets an opportunity to take advantage of. And Mario's similar. Though again, Mario, very similar to... which character was that? Oh, very similar to Diddy Kong. Mario, he can't wall cling, but he can wall jump. And he does have a few mix-up options. He can side B, he can up B. He has a few get-off-me tools. Next up is Lucario at 60-40. And this is coming from Day and Sue, the famous Japanese Lucario player. Again, I agree with this one, but the thing about Lucario that's very interesting is, for me, how good the matchup is, with him, with any character, this is just my personal opinion, it just depends on his percent. If he has Rage, he's got a good matchup against almost every character. Because when he hits, he's going to hit like a truck. If he doesn't have Rage, or if he has a decent amount of Rage, maybe he's at 60-70%, but not enough, it's entirely possible for his opponent to exploit him and even get an early kill off of it. Also, extreme speed is actually not very hard to exploit. It can be hard to control for the Lucario player. So for me, I would say 60-40, but I also say it depends on how the Lucario player plays and how much rage they have. Very, very rage dependent. That's just the character Rage and Aura. Next up is Lucas, and this comes from PK Blueberry and Tahita, two very good Lucas players. And for me personally, this is again one of those few matchups. I wouldn't say it's quite as bad as 60-40. Lucas, unlike a character like Ness, for example, is a combo character. And Lucas, his combo game is very strong, but it's also to some degree a crutch. He really relies on getting those combos. And when he gets them, he gets a lot of damage off of them, but getting them with his tether grab can be a challenge. So I'd say I might put him right with Ness, somewhere within like the 55-45 range. And honestly, in Lucas's case, maybe put him in 50-50, maybe. More than likely 55-45. Next up is Meta Knight, and this comes from Zane and S2H. And again, I can definitely see this. Obviously, Puff's a character who wants to dominate and bully opponents in the air, but that's not going to happen with Meta Knight. You know, he also has one of the best aerial games in the game along with Puff. I definitely say his is, in my opinion, significantly better than Puff's. His ground game is good, maybe a little bit lackluster, but overall very good. He wants to dash attack you and combo and convert off of that, or maybe get a down throw or a forward throw and convert off of that possibly. So I definitely see it being a 60-40. Next up is Mewtwo, and this is coming straight from Abadango. And again, I can definitely see how this would seem like a 60-40 in Mewtwo's favor. The character just has so many tools at their disposal. They've got back throw, up throw, you've got shatter balls for pressure and neutral. Obviously, back aerial and up tilt have incredible range. The character has so many tools at their disposal. I definitely agree with this one. Now next up is Pac-Man with Sinji, and at 60-40. So for me personally, this is a matchup where my opinion of Pac-Man, it's kind of wavering, but it's not too high. I could see how Pac-Man with his projectiles could wall Puff out. My only thing personally is, you know, Pac-Man is one of the characters who's somewhat similar to DDD and Zelda. These characters have a really bad disadvantage state. Really bad. What Pac-Man will do if he wants you to get off of him is you'll use the hydrant, or he might side B. But since you know he's going to use the hydrant, you can respond with an up tilt or an up smash. So in my experience, even playing as Puff, you can actually give Pac-Man a lot of pressure. He does have a lot of quick moves at his disposal, but because he has a hard time grabbing, it can be really hard for him to deal with pressure. So for me personally, I would put this in the 50-50 realm. I wouldn't say Puff has the advantage, because his projectile game, especially if the Pac-Man player is spacing properly and they're using good get off me options, I can see this being a 50-50. But this is from Sinji's opinion. Alright, next is Palutena from Prince Ramen. This one I can absolutely see. Palutena's up smash is amazing. Her up smash is just, it's God tier. It's actually pretty good. She has also a pretty strong combo game. If I'm correct, she has some sort of intangibility or invincibility on her dash attack and back aerial, which can make it very hard for Puff to get in the air. So I can definitely see this one. Next up, we've got Pit and Dark Pit. Couldn't find anything on Dark Pit, but let's be honest, these are more or less the same character. This comes from Kuro and Plastic Pop-Tart. And again, I can absolutely see this. Pit's aerial game is pretty good. It's not bad at all. And same thing for the ground. Pit's ground game is also not that bad too. Pit is, when it comes to his ground and aerial game, they're pretty even side. They're pretty balanced. He does have a lackluster recovery, but he also has side B. So while Puff could bully him, if the Pit plays right, it can be very difficult for the Puff player. Alright, next up we've got Robin from Scorpio. This is another one of those matchups I can see being even worse than 60-40, in my opinion. Maybe 65-35. Very similar to Link. This character has a strong projectile game, but also with their, I think it's called the Levin Sword. Hopefully I'm getting the sword right. Not big into Fire Emblem. But the sword with those electric properties, they hit very hard, and Checkmate can do Puff in incredibly early. Next we have Ryu, and this comes from Dark Chat. And just like Robin, this is another one I can see getting much worse. Ryu just, Ryu hits like a truck. Ryu, in my opinion, hits even harder than Little Mac in this particular matchup, because with Little Mac, there's always the chance that the Puff player can get them off stage and gimp them, space properly. But with Ryu, the character hits so hard while also having a pretty decent recovery overall. Kind of hard to exploit. Also having a projectile in neutral B, super armor in down B, and Ryu just has very strong mix-ups, especially on the ground, but even in the air. So I could definitely see this matchup being a little bit worse for Puff, in my opinion. Next up, we've got our boy Roy, and this comes from Lunchables and Levy. Again, this is one of the few, I can see this potentially being in 55-45, certainly not 50-50, maybe being 55-45. Because again, Roy he plays very similar to Captain Falcon. Very, very strong presence on the ground, great advantage state, or I should say fairly good advantage state. Very exploitable in the air. Very, very linear recovery. It's not all hard to bully Roy when he's in the air. So I could see this being a 55-45 just for that fact. Puff could die at like 40% to one of his forward smashes, but Puff can also gimp him at like 40% and kill him. So I would say somewhere in this realm. I couldn't see it being a 50-50 though, thanks to his range. Alright, next up we've got Samus. This comes from Pyres and Astria. And again, I can definitely see this being a 60-40. I wouldn't say it's any worse, but I certainly wouldn't say it's any better. Samus has just such a strong projectile game, very good at zoning and keeping Puff out. Samus's ground game is a little bit lackluster, just a little bit, and that kind of helps Puff in that regard. And off stage, again, Samus can kind of be bullied. Samus could use moves like up air, fair, get off me moves, but it is possible for Puff to get a gimp. Alright, next up we've got Shulk, and this comes from Nico. And this one's pretty straightforward, doesn't need too much explaining. Obviously, Shulk has, if I'm correct, the best range of any swordsman in the game. So it's not all hard for Shulk to just completely wall Puff out, especially in the air, which is where Puff's primarily going to be. So this one's pretty straightforward. There's no denying this one. Next up is Sonic from Seagull Joe. And again, this one, pretty straightforward once again. A common strategy with Puff is to hit and run, but Sonic's going to outdo you with that one. At the same time, while Sonic's recovery is somewhat exploitable, having a wall jump really helps, along with his neutral B. That can really help him get back on stage. But his mobility is just a real pain for Puff to deal with. Really, for the majority of the cast, his mobility is a pain for him to deal with, so I can definitely see this. Next up, we've got Toon Link from Sigma and 3XA. I don't know why it says Simga. That is not his tag in 3XA. Again, I can see this one. I couldn't see this one getting any worse or any better, unlike Link, who I think is actually worse than this. Because Toon Link does have, to some degree, some of the same hitbox durations, but his range isn't quite as crazy as Link's is. He does have more mobility. That's to be noted. But I definitely would agree with this being a 60-40. Strong projectile game just to keep Puff out, make it hard to get in. Next up, we've got Yoshi. This comes from Seth and Dio. And again, I can very much see this. Yoshi's just a very annoying character to deal with. Even if you know the matchup, depending on who you're playing, Yoshi can be a pain to deal with. Yoshi can lose pretty hard to DLC, but if you're not DLC, he can definitely give you a run for your money. Next up is Greninja from Ice Arrow and Leah. And Greninja is a very interesting character. Now, it's to be noted that this is a matchup I used to think could be worse than 60-40. But, again, his recovery is very exploitable. He doesn't really have any mix-ups. He could mix up using side B. I believe he has a wall cling and a wall jump. Those can help. But Greninja's, to some degree, a sitting duck when he's off stage trying to recover. So that's what I think really makes this 60-40 a 60-40. That's kind of a theme with the majority of these characters. Either they can be bullied off stage or their ground game is just lackluster enough for Puff to get a little bit of leeway. Now last up, we've got Bayonetta. This is coming from Captain Zack. And we've got Pikachu coming from Sm4sh. I can definitely see both of these being worse than 64. There's not a doubt in my mind. Obviously, Bayonetta, best character in the game, bodies about 90% of the cast. Very hard to deal with. Rip your GameCube controllers because you're going to be SDIing. So I can definitely see that. Pikachu, very similar. Pikachu has a very solid ground game and a very solid air game. Pikachu does have range issues and kill issues, but it's Puff. And Puff's range isn't that good. And obviously it's the lightest character in the game, so Puff's going to die early. So two of Pikachu's biggest issues, among a few others, are pretty much alleviated in this matchup. So it's really not hard for Pikachu to bully Puff. And if I'm correct, when I saw the matchup chart for Sm4sh, he actually said that this was free. And I hate to say it, I definitely agree with that. But with that covers all of the characters in this video. It's probably going to end up a little bit longer than I wanted it to. But more importantly, what do you guys think? What's your opinion on this list? Do you agree with everything? Most of the people I've shown before releasing this video have actually agreed with this, very much so. So what's your opinion on the matter? Now also, as I said before, I kind of do want to make this a series. It'd be very interesting just to get some top players' opinions, at least the ones who have released matchup charts, and see where the characters rank overall with the top players' consensus. It's very fun and very interesting. Maybe even what you guys can do in addition to expressing your opinion on this video, maybe in the comments section, leave which character you want me to do next, and I can jump right on that. Alright guys, this has been Halcyon, your local scrub, and I'll see you guys next time.